I never expected my wife would become my number one enemy, not just for cheating, but for stealing money from my card. I never imagined I'd be telling this story on the internet, trying to make sense of how my life collapsed in one night. My name's Caleb. I'm 34, a construction foreman in Baltimore. I've spent years working up to this job, grinding through long hours to make sure my family has everything they need. My wife, Lena, and I have been married for 11 years. We got 2 kids, Max, who's 10, and Ellie, who's 7. Our life was normal, or at least I thought so. I thought I was doing right by them, working hard, being a good husband, and providing for our family. I didn't see it coming, the betrayal, the lies, or the secrets. It was a Thursday, and I was coming home earlier than usual. We'd wrapped up work ahead of schedule, and I figured I'd surprise Lena, maybe help with the kids, and unwind a bit. She had mentioned she'd be home, putting Max and Ellie to bed, like always. But when I opened the front door, the house was empty. Not quiet in the usual, kids are already asleep kind of way, but empty in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. The house was clean, unnervingly clean. No toys scattered across the floor, no noise from the TV, no sign of Max or Ellie's usual chaos. My work boots felt loud on the hardwood floor as I stepped inside, setting my tool bag by the door. Something wasn't right. I called out for Lena. Lena? Nothing. The silence was thick, and I could feel the tension building in my chest. I checked my phone, no messages. That's when my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw a message from Sue, our neighbor across the street. She's the type that always keeps an eye on what's going on, sometimes too much for her own good. Just wanted to let you know the kids are with me. Lena said you had an emergency at work. An emergency? I hadn't been called in for anything. No late shifts, no sudden changes. I was supposed to be home. The knot in my stomach tightened. Why would Lena lie? Where was she? I wandered into the living room. The scent of Lena's perfume hung in the air, but it was stronger than usual, almost too sweet. Not the kind she normally wears. I stood there for a moment, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. The living room was spotless, like no one had touched it in hours. Everything was in its place, too perfect. The cushions were lined up on the couch, and the kids' backpacks were missing. None of it made sense. I walked down the hallway toward the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I climbed, I could feel my heart beating faster. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar, and something about it made me stop for a second before pushing it open. The bed was made, which wasn't unusual for Lena. She liked things tidy. But there, lying in a heap on the floor, was her new dress, the one she bought just a week ago. It was crumpled up, like it had been carelessly tossed aside. The scent of smoke clung to it, but not the kind from our house. It smelled like someone else, like cologne, something cheap and musky. My gut twisted as I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It reeked of something wrong. I dropped the dress into the laundry basket and stepped toward her side of the bed. My eyes landed on her phone, sitting on the nightstand. Lena never left her phone behind, not when she went out. It was glued to her hand most of the time, always buzzing with messages or social media alerts. Something felt off, but my hands were shaking as I picked it up. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but something told me I needed to see what was on that screen. One swipe, and her messages opened. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the screen. There were several unread messages from a contact listed only as J. I opened the thread, my stomach tightening with every word. The conversation was casual, but too familiar. Then I saw it. See you next week? I'll book the hotel again. Same room. The message hit me like a punch in the gut. I stood there, frozen, staring at the screen. My head was spinning, trying to make sense of what I was reading. This wasn't just some misunderstanding. This wasn't innocent. She was meeting someone. I scrolled up, scanning the history of their messages. Plans, details, lies. I heard a car pull into the driveway, the sound of tires on gravel, followed by the familiar hum of Lena's engine. My heart raced. She was home. I dropped her phone back onto the nightstand, my mind scrambling for what to do next. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. I'd come home early to surprise her, to see my kids, to relax for once. But now I stood there, on the edge of a confrontation I wasn't ready for, knowing that everything I thought was solid between us was about to shatter. The front door opened downstairs, and I heard Lena's footsteps on the hardwood floor, casual, as if nothing had happened. As if she wasn't walking into a storm. "Caleb." Her voice was light, almost cheerful. She had no idea. "You home?" I stood there, staring at the doorway, feeling the anger building inside me. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew that from this moment on, nothing was ever going to be the same. I stood at the top of the stairs, still reeling from what I'd found on Lena's phone. The messages from Jay weren't just harmless banter. They were proof. Proof that something was going on, something she hadn't told me about. And now she was home, oblivious to the storm waiting for her. I heard her humming downstairs, moving around like it was just another normal night. But it wasn't. Nothing about this was normal anymore. My legs felt heavy as I walked down the stairs, one slow step at a time. The sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floor echoed through the house. Lena glanced up when I entered the kitchen, her face lighting up with a smile that made my stomach turn. "Hey, you're home early," she said almost too casually. "I didn't expect you back yet." I stared at her for a moment, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, finished up the job early." She was too calm, too comfortable, like nothing was out of the ordinary. My eyes drifted to her bag on the counter, the same bag she took everywhere. I couldn't stop thinking about those texts. The hotel, the plans, the lies. "Where have you been, Lena?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. She blinked, her smile faltering for a second. "I told you I dropped the kids off at Sue's. I was just helping a friend. You know, it's been kind of a stressful day." "Helping a friend?" I repeated, my voice low. "Which friend?" Lena shifted, her fingers tapping the counter. "You don't know her. Just someone from yoga." She needed some advice about something. She didn't sound convincing, not even to herself. My heart was pounding now, the anger simmering just below the surface. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorway, staring her down. "So, dropping the kids off at Sue's was part of helping this friend?" Lena's eyes flickered, just for a second, and she bit her lip, clearly sensing where this was going. "Yeah," she replied a little too quickly. "They were having a good time, so I figured I'd let them stay for a bit longer." I could feel my jaw tighten. I wasn't buying it. Not for a second. "And you didn't think to mention this emergency to me? I mean, Sue said you told her I had to stay late at work." Funny thing, I didn't get called in late. Her eyes widened slightly, caught off guard. She quickly covered it up with a forced laugh. "I must have misunderstood, Caleb. You know how it is, sometimes I get my wires crossed." Her explanation was flimsy, and we both knew it. The silence between us stretched uncomfortably, the tension thick in the air. I decided to push further. "And the dress upstairs?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. "The one that smells like someone else's cologne? Was that part of helping your friend too?" Her smile vanished. Lena froze, her face going pale. For the first time, she seemed to realize that I wasn't just asking innocent questions. I knew. I saw the way her shoulders tensed, the way her fingers twitched nervously by her side. She took a small step back, almost like she was trying to retreat from the conversation. "Caleb, what are you talking about?" Her voice was shaky now, uncertain. I stepped forward, closing the gap between us. "I saw the messages, Lena. From Jay. You think I don't know what's going on?" For a second, she just stared at me, her mouth slightly open, as if she didn't know what to say. Then, she blinked rapidly, shaking her head. "Wait, no, Caleb, it's not what you think. Not what I think." I cut her off, my voice rising with the anger I'd been holding back. "What I think is you've been sneaking around behind my back. What I think is you've been lying to me, for God knows how long." Her face crumpled, and she took a step closer, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I pulled back, not ready for that. "Not now." She hesitated, then dropped her hand. "It's not like that," she whispered. It's just been hard, okay? We've been distant, and I needed someone to talk to." "Talk to?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "This is more than just talking, Lena. You've been meeting him. You think I'm an idiot?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it. "Not this time. Caleb, please, it was only emotional. I swear I never." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't stand there and try to downplay this." I read those texts. Hotel rooms, plans, this isn't just some emotional thing, Lena. You've been lying to my face." Her lips trembled, and she wiped at her eyes, sniffling. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Caleb. I didn't. I felt like you weren't there anymore. You're always working late, always focused on something else. I felt like a ghost in this house, like you didn't even see me anymore." I stared at her, my chest tightening. This was it. The deflection, the shifting blame. Suddenly, her affair was my fault. I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to keep the frustration from boiling over. "So, that's your excuse? I'm working too much, so you start sneaking around with someone else? That's supposed to justify all of this?" Her face twisted in guilt and frustration, and she took another step forward. "You don't understand, Caleb. I was lonely. I needed to feel something again. I never wanted to hurt you, but—" I held up my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "But you did. You did hurt me, Lena, and you didn't care. You kept doing it over and over, hiding it from me, lying to me." She opened her mouth, about to say something, but before she could, there was a sudden knock at the door. It was loud, sharp, like the world outside was intruding on our shattered reality. Lena flinched, her eyes darting toward the front of the house. I glanced in the same direction, my heart racing for a different reason now. Who the hell could that be right now? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "We're not done here," I said, pointing a finger at her. "Don't think for a second that this conversation is over." She nodded, her face pale, still standing in the kitchen as I turned toward the front door. My steps felt heavy as I crossed the living room, my mind still spinning from everything Lena had just said. Who could possibly be showing up in the middle of this? I opened the door, and there, standing on the porch with a stupid grin on his face, was Tom. "Hey man," he said, oblivious to the tension in the air. "Thought I'd drop by, see how you're doing. Got a minute?" A minute. That was all it took for the fury inside me to flare up again. Tom, of all people. His timing couldn't have been worse. Lena's words were still ringing in my ears. Her excuses, her lies. Now, Tom was standing there like nothing was wrong, completely unaware of the fact that my entire life was falling apart. Or was he unaware? I stood there, frozen for a second, staring at him, trying to decide whether to punch him in the face or let him inside. Tom, my friend? Or was he? "Yes, sure. Come in," I said, stepping back and gesturing for him to enter. "Lena's here too." Tom raised an eyebrow as he stepped inside, the grin on his face faltering just a bit. "Oh yeah? Good timing, I guess." I shut the door behind him, watching closely as he kicked off his shoes and glanced around the living room like he was looking for something, or someone. Lena still hadn't shown her face, and that only made my gut tighten further. I walked past Tom, forcing myself to act normal, but every instinct I had was on high alert. "Lena," I called, my voice steady, though my patience was thinning fast. "Tom's here." After a few seconds, she finally appeared at the kitchen doorway, her face tight with an expression I couldn't quite place. She looked at Tom, then at me, her movements awkward, like she wasn't sure how to act. "Oh, hey, Tom," she said, her voice strained but trying for casual. "Didn't know you were coming by." Tom smiled a little too easily, and I caught the brief glance he gave her. Quick, almost too quick, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. "Yeah, just dropping in. Thought I'd check in with Caleb." The room was thick with unspoken tension. Something was wrong, and I was starting to get a sickening feeling that whatever this was, it went deeper than I first thought. I leaned against the arm of the couch, folding my arms as I watched them both carefully. "So, what's new with you, Tom?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, but my eyes were fixed on Lena as she moved stiffly back toward the kitchen. She hadn't said much since he arrived, and that wasn't like her. Lena was usually quick with the small talk, especially with Tom. But tonight she was off, way off. Tom shrugged, shoving his hands in his pockets. "Not much. Just been busy with work, same old, same old. You know how it is." I nodded slowly, still watching Lena as she busied herself with some glasses on the counter, though her hands were shaking slightly. "Work's been crazy, huh?" I said, my voice sharp enough to catch Tom's attention. He glanced at me, a flicker of something passing over his face before he recovered with a casual laugh. "Yeah, man, you know how it is. Long days, late nights." "Late nights," I repeated, my voice low. Right. Tom chuckled again, though it sounded forced. Yeah, it's been killer lately. I let the silence stretch between us, the weight of it pressing down on all three of us. Tom shifted on his feet, glancing between me and Lena, who was still avoiding eye contact. That look she gave him earlier, the way her body language changed the second he walked in, it all clicked in my mind. My heart was pounding again, but now it wasn't just from anger. It was something worse, something far darker. How's work been for you, Tom? I asked, stepping closer, my eyes narrowing. You been keeping busy lately? Tom blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in my tone. He hesitated before answering. Yeah, I've been keeping busy. Why? Just wondering, I said, keeping my voice neutral. You seem to know Lena's schedule pretty well these days. Almost like you're keeping track. He froze for a split second, and I caught it, just the tiniest flinch. But it was enough. My heart sank as the pieces began to fall into place, the reality of it crashing down around me. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny the signs any longer. Lena turned around from the counter, her face pale, her lips pressed tightly together. She didn't say anything, but the guilt was written all over her. Tom shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the shift in the room. I should probably head out, he mumbled, avoiding eye contact as he moved toward the door. Didn't mean to intrude. I didn't stop him. I just watched as he fumbled with his shoes, throwing an awkward glance back at Lena before pulling open the door and stepping outside. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me standing there in the thick, suffocating silence with Lena. I turned to her, my blood boiling again, the pieces of this twisted puzzle finally coming together in my mind. How long? I asked, my voice dangerously low. Lena looked down at the floor, her hands trembling as she gripped the counter behind her. Caleb, it's not what you think. Don't lie to me, I growled, cutting her off. How long, Lena? How long have you been confiding in him? She squeezed her eyes shut, her breath shaky. It's not what you think, she whispered again, but this time her voice cracked, the guilt seeping through her words. He was just there when I needed someone to talk to. It was never more than that. I swear. I stepped closer, my fists clenched at my sides. Don't stand there and tell me it was just talking. I saw the way you looked at him. I'm not stupid, Lena. How long? She finally met my eyes, her face crumpling as she realized there was no way out. Months, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's been going on for months. But it wasn't physical, Caleb. I swear. He was just there for me, emotionally. You've been so distant. I didn't know who else to turn to. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. So, what, you turned to Tom? My friend? You went to him, behind my back, and I'm supposed to believe it was just emotional? Lena's tears were streaming down her face now, but I didn't care. I didn't mean for it to happen, she sobbed. I was lonely, Caleb. I needed someone. I didn't think it would go this far. I wanted to scream, to break something, but instead, I just stood there staring at her as the weight of it all settled over me. Months. She'd been lying to me for months, confiding in Tom, letting him into our lives in ways I hadn't even realized. Before I could say anything else, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, frowning at the unknown number flashing on the screen. Who the hell is this? Lena froze, her eyes widening slightly as I answered the call. Hello? Is this Caleb? A man's voice on the other end asked. It was low, serious, and unfamiliar. Yeah, who's this? There was a brief pause before the man spoke again. My name's Jake. We need to talk about Lena. I stepped outside into the garage, needing space, air, anything to clear my head. My mind was already racing, my hands trembling from everything that had just unfolded. Lena's confession about Tom, the months of lies, everything was falling apart faster than I could process. And now, this phone call from some guy named Jake. I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around it. The cool night air hit my face as I stood by the workbench, staring at the garage door. I didn't want to take the call inside, not with Lena just a few feet away. I didn't trust myself to keep calm, not after everything that had already been said. I put the phone back to my ear, forcing myself to focus. Yeah, this is Caleb, I said, my voice tight with anger. Who the hell is Jake? There was a pause on the other end, like the guy was figuring out how to start. Look, man, I don't know how to say this, but I've been seeing Lena for a while now. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I gripped the edge of the workbench, trying to steady myself. Seeing her? I repeated, my voice low, dangerous. What the hell are you talking about? Jake's voice was calm, like he'd rehearsed this. I'm not here to mess with you, Caleb. I didn't know she was married at first. I found out later, and by then, it was too late. She cut me off a few weeks ago, but I still had her phone records. That's how I got your number. I needed to talk to you. You need to know what's been going on. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This stranger, some guy I'd never even met, knew more about my wife's life than I did. I gritted my teeth, trying to stay calm, but my patience was wearing thin. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. I don't want anything, Jake said quickly. I just think you deserve to know the truth. Lena and we were together for over a year. She told me she was unhappy, that you two were distant, and that she was staying for the kids. We met up at hotels, out of town. She paid for most of it. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I'm realizing that money might have come from you. I froze. Money. My heart started racing again, this time for a different reason. What do you mean paid for it? She's been using my money. I'm sorry, man, Jake continued, his voice softening. I don't know all the details, but yes, she used her card a lot. I didn't question it, but now that I'm looking back, I'm pretty sure it wasn't her money she was spending. You might want to check your accounts. I could barely think straight. Lena wasn't just cheating, she was stealing. I'd been working my ass off, coming home late, all while she was spending my hard-earned money on hotels and trips with this guy. I felt sick, like the ground was slipping out from under me. How deep did this betrayal go? Where did you two meet? I asked, my voice flat cold. Jake hesitated, then sighed. Mostly at hotels along Route 40, a few places near the outskirts of the city. She'd tell me she was at work or visiting a friend when we met up. I'm sorry, man. I had no idea it was like this until recently. I knew those places. Route 40. Lena had mentioned work meetings in that area, saying she had to travel for a few hours at a time. I never questioned it. She'd always been good at explaining things away, making it seem like everything was normal. But now the lies were unraveling, each one making me feel more like a fool. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Over a year, Jake replied, his tone heavy with guilt. We started seeing each other around last summer. She told me she was unhappy, that you two barely talked anymore. I didn't know it would go this far. I stood there, the weight of his words crashing down on me. Over a year. A full year of my wife living a double life, stealing from me, lying to my face, and sharing our bed like everything was fine. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to keep it together, but the rage was building inside me, threatening to explode. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, trying to get a grip on the situation. If she's been cutting you off, why bother calling me? Jake hesitated again, and I could hear the regret in his voice. Because I didn't know what else to do, man. She stopped contacting me out of the blue. I thought something might have happened, so I looked into it. That's when I found out about you. I figured you should know what she's been doing. No one deserves to be kept in the dark like that. I couldn't believe it. I thought the worst of it was behind me after confronting Lena about Tom. But now this? Now I had to deal with the fact that Lena had been sneaking around with two men, and one of them had been funneling my money out of our accounts for God knows how long. I needed to see the damage for myself. Thanks for letting me know, I said through gritted teeth, wanting to get off the phone as quickly as possible. But I need to deal with this now. Good luck, man, Jake said quietly. For what it's worth, I'm really sorry. I hung up without another word. I couldn't stand to hear him apologize. What the hell was I supposed to do with an apology? It wasn't going to fix the mess Lena had made, and it sure as hell wasn't going to bring back the money she'd stolen. I stormed back into the house, heading straight for my laptop. Lena was still in the kitchen, pacing, her face pale. She looked up at me as I entered, her eyes filled with fear. Caleb, what? I don't want to hear it. I snapped, cutting her off as I powered up my laptop. I pulled up our joint bank account, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to see the numbers. I needed to know how much she had taken. The screen loaded, and there it was, dozens of transactions, all in places I didn't recognize. Hotels, restaurants, shopping malls. The amounts varied, but it added up fast. Thousands of dollars. Gone. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with rage. What the hell is this, Lena? I demanded, my voice shaking. You've been draining our account? You think I wouldn't notice? She stood frozen, her face ashen. Caleb, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just needed a way to... Needed a way to what? I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. You were spending my money on some guy? On trips? Hotels? How could you do this? Tears spilled down her face, but I didn't care. I was lost, she whispered, her voice cracking. I was so unhappy, and I didn't know how to fix it. I know it was wrong. I know I hurt you, but I didn't know what else to do. I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. You could have talked to me, Lena. We could have worked through it. But instead, you chose this. You lied, you stole. I don't even know who you are anymore. She sobbed, covering her face with her hands, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. The damage was too deep. The betrayal, too raw. I leaned over the table, staring her down. Tell me one thing, Lena, I said, my voice cold. Why? Why did you keep doing it? She lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. Because I didn't know how to stop. I couldn't look at her anymore. The sight of her standing there, crying, trying to explain away her lies, it made me sick. I grabbed my keys from the counter, not trusting myself to stay in the same room with her. Caleb, wait, she cried, running after me as I headed for the door. I turned around, my hand on the doorknob, and glared at her. I'm done, Lena. I'm done with all of this. You took everything from me, and now you're going to live with it. I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing through the quiet night. I didn't know where I was going, but anywhere was better than here. I didn't know where I was going when I left the house that night. I just needed air, space, anything to distance myself from the whirlwind of lies and betrayal that had blown my life apart in a matter of hours. The cold night air felt sharp against my face as I drove aimlessly through the streets of Baltimore, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My mind was running wild with everything I'd learned. Lena's affair with Jake, the stolen money, the endless lies she'd spun to keep me in the dark. And Tom, Jesus Tom, after what felt like hours, I found myself parked on a random side street, staring blankly out the windshield. I wasn't ready to go back, but I couldn't stay here forever, letting my anger boil over without confronting her. If there was any chance of figuring out what came next, I needed to hear everything, no more dodging, no more half-truths. I turned the car around and headed back toward the house. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the lights inside were still on. She was waiting. Good. I wasn't done with her yet. I stepped out of the car, my body tense, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to snap. My head was spinning with the weight of everything I had to say, everything I needed her to explain. By the time I walked back inside, the kitchen was quiet. Lena was sitting at the table, her face blotchy from crying, her hands trembling as she stared down at the empty space in front of her. She looked up when I entered, her eyes bloodshot, but I wasn't in the mood for sympathy. I wasn't here for another round of apologies. I wanted answers. Caleb, don't. I cut her off sharply, raising a hand to silence her. I'm not here to listen to more of your excuses. I know about Jake. I know about the money. You've been lying to me for months, Lena. Stealing from me. Her face crumpled, and she let out a shaky breath, but I wasn't moved by her tears anymore. Caleb, I didn't know how to stop. I swear, I didn't mean for it to get this far. Bullshit. I snapped, slamming my keys down on the counter. You knew exactly what you were doing. You chose this, Lena. You chose to lie, to steal from me, to keep sneaking around like I was some idiot. How long did you think you could keep this up? She flinched at the venom in my voice, her fingers clutching the edge of the table. I didn't want to hurt you, but I was so lonely. I interrupted, already knowing the excuse she'd fall back on. That's what you're going with? You were lonely, so you decided to screw some guy behind my back and funnel our money into your secret life? How does that make sense to you? Lena looked down, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she finally spoke. Jake, you made me feel alive again, Caleb. You were never home. You were always working late, always focused on something else. I felt invisible here. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head in disbelief. So this is my fault now? I was working late to provide for this family, Lena. For you, for the kids. You think I enjoyed being out there, busting my ass for hours on end while you sat here feeling invisible? You could have talked to me. You could have said something, anything, but instead, you ran off to him. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore, she shot back, her voice rising in desperation. Every time I tried, you were too tired or too distracted. You stopped seeing me, Caleb. You stopped caring. And I slammed my hand on the table, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to spin this around on me. I gave you everything, Lena. Everything. And you threw it all away for some guy who made you feel alive? What the hell does that even mean? Her eyes flashed with anger, the guilt giving way to something darker, more defensive. You think this is all on me? She snapped, standing up now, her hands shaking. You think you're innocent in all of this? You weren't here, Caleb. You weren't present. You buried yourself in work, and when you did come home, you barely spoke to me. I was just something in the background of your life. My blood was boiling now. Every word she said stoking the fire inside me. So that's it then? That's your excuse? You felt neglected, so you decided to blow up our entire life. You neglected me first, she screamed, her voice cracking. You made me feel like a ghost in this house. I didn't even exist to you anymore. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was furious. No, furious wasn't even the right word. I was disgusted, both with her and with myself for ever trusting her, for letting it get this far. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. I'm not the only one with secrets, she spat, her voice trembling. I found the messages, Caleb, months ago, from her. I blinked, thrown off by the accusation. What the hell are you talking about? Don't play dumb, she snapped, tears streaming down her face now. I saw them. On your phone. Messages from your ex, from months ago. Don't act like you're so innocent in all of this. You were hiding things from me too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I hadn't spoken to my ex in years. Whatever she thought she'd seen was either a complete misunderstanding or some wild reach to justify her own lies. But the look on her face told me she believed every word she was saying. You're out of your mind, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I haven't spoken to her in years. Whatever you think you saw, it wasn't anything. You're just trying to shift the blame. Her face twisted in frustration, and she wiped at her tears, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. You don't get it, Caleb. You've been distant, hiding things from me. You never told me when you were struggling, when things were hard. You shut me out, just like you're doing now. I shook my head, trying to make sense of what she was saying. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She fired back, her voice filled with desperation. You've been lying to me just like I've been lying to you. Admit it. And then, in a moment of blind frustration, the words came tumbling out before I could stop them. I lost my job months ago. Lena stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open as she processed what I'd just said. The silence that followed was deafening. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of my own secret crashing down around me. There was no going back now. I lost my job months ago. I repeated, my voice hollow. I didn't want you to know. I've been using our savings to keep things afloat, trying to buy time while I figured something out. Lena stared at me, her face pale, her hands trembling at her sides. You've been lying to me? I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Yeah, Lena, I guess we're both liars. She stood there, stunned, like the wind had been knocked out of her. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time tonight, I saw her unravel completely, her entire facade crumbling as the weight of everything we'd both hidden from each other came crashing down. I couldn't even look at her anymore. The guilt, the anger, it was too much. We were both guilty, both responsible for this mess. But that didn't change what she had done. It didn't change the fact that she'd betrayed me in ways I couldn't forgive. Lena sank into the chair, burying her face in her hands, her sobs echoing through the kitchen. But I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not after everything. Not after all the lies. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, my mind racing as I made my way outside. I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not with her. "Where are you going?" she called after me, her voice desperate, broken. I paused at the door, my back to her, my hand on the knob. "I don't know," I said quietly. "But I can't be here right now." I didn't wait for her response. I didn't need to hear it. I stepped outside, letting the door close behind me, leaving Lena alone in the house we had built together, now shattered by the weight of our lies. The house was quiet when I returned, the kind of silence that settles thick and heavy after a storm. I wasn't sure what I expected when I walked back through the door. Maybe Lena would still be sitting at the kitchen table, too exhausted from everything to move. Maybe she would have packed her things and left. But when I stepped inside, she was exactly where I left her, slumped over, eyes hollow, staring at the worn tabletop as if it held some kind of answer. I didn't speak right away. Neither did she. The tension between us was palpable, the air so thick with it I could almost feel it pressing down on my shoulders. I tossed my jacket on the chair, my steps slow and deliberate as I approached the kitchen. We needed to talk to figure out what the hell came next. But after everything that had been said, after every secret that had come to light, I wasn't sure there was anything left to salvage. I pulled out a chair across from her, the scrape of the legs against the floor loud in the otherwise still room. Lena didn't look up, her fingers tracing patterns on the wood as if they could avoid what was coming. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice sounding far more drained than I intended. Lena swallowed hard, finally lifting her eyes to meet mine. They were swollen from crying, red-rimmed and puffy, but there was no fire left in them. Just an emptiness that mirrored how I felt. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice cracked and raw. "I don't know, Caleb." I leaned forward, my elbows resting on the table, hands clasped together as I tried to keep my voice steady. "We can't keep doing this, Lena. Not like this. We can't pretend everything will go back to normal." She nodded slowly, but the words were caught in her throat. I could see it, her mind racing, trying to find something, anything, to hold on to. "The kids," she said softly. "What about Max and Ellie? That was the heart of it, wasn't it? The kids. Our children were the only thing holding any of this together, the only reason we hadn't torn each other apart already. But even for them, I knew there was no saving this. Not after everything I'd learned. We need to think about what's best for them," I said, keeping my tone measured. It's not good for them. We can't let them see us like this." Lena's lip quivered, but she nodded. I know, but she paused, taking a shaky breath. "You're going to try to take them, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away. My silence was enough. I had to think about Max and Ellie. I had to make sure they were taken care of, and I couldn't trust Lena after what she'd done. The infidelity, the lies, the stolen money, it all added up to someone who wasn't capable of being the mother they needed right now. "I'm calling Anna," I said finally, my voice firm but not cruel. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to push for full custody. You know I have to." Lena's face crumpled, tears spilling over her cheeks as she tried to hold herself together. "Caleb, please," she sobbed. "Please don't take them from me. I can't lose them. I know I've made mistakes, but they're my kids. I'm their mother. I'm doing this for them," I said, my voice unwavering. "They need stability, Lena. They need someone who's not going to put them in danger. You stole from me. You lied. How am I supposed to trust you with them?" She shook her head, the sobs racking her body. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I was lost. I didn't know what to do. But I love them, Caleb. You know that." Her words hit me like a knife, but I didn't falter. I had to be strong for Max and Ellie. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found Anna's number. I hesitated for a moment, glancing at Lena as she sat there, broken and pleading. Then I hit the call button. Anna picked up on the second ring. "Caleb?" "Yeah, it's me," I said, standing up and pacing the kitchen. "I need to move forward with the divorce. I want to file for full custody of the kids." Anna's voice was calm, professional. "I figured you'd come to that decision. I'll start preparing the papers." "Have you spoken to Lena about it?" "I have," I said, glancing back at her. "She knows it's coming." "Good. We'll need to document everything. The infidelity, the financial issues, any evidence you have of her instability. It'll strengthen your case. I nodded, though Anna couldn't see me. Yeah, I'll get you everything you need. There was a pause on the line before Anna spoke again. Caleb, I don't know if you've heard, but there's something you should know. Jake, he was arrested yesterday. Fraud charges. Turns out he's been involved in some shady dealings. Lena's association with him could complicate things. It might affect your case. I stopped pacing, the words sinking in like lead. What? He's in custody now? There's talk of a bigger investigation into his finances. If Lena's connected to any of it, she is. I interrupted, my voice tense. She used my money to pay for their trips, the hotels. Thousands of dollars. That's what I thought, Anna said, her tone serious. You need to be careful, Caleb. This could turn into a legal mess, and Lena might end up in deeper trouble than she realizes. I stared at the floor, the weight of this new information hitting me hard. This wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about potential criminal charges, investigations, legal battles that could drag on for months. Maybe years. I'll deal with it, I said finally, though my mind was racing. Just get the papers ready. I hung up and turned back to Lena, who was still crying softly at the table. She hadn't heard the conversation, but I could see she knew something was wrong. What is it? She asked, her voice trembling. Jake's been arrested, I said bluntly. Fraud. They're investigating him. And if they find out you've been involved, Lena, this could get ugly. You could be in serious trouble. Her eyes widened in shock, her breath catching in her throat. What? No. I didn't know. I didn't know he was involved in anything like that. I don't think it matters, I said, crossing my arms. You used my money. You went along with it. They'll see you as an accomplice, Lena. You're tied to him now. Her face turned pale, panic flooding her expression. No, I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't know, Caleb. Please, you have to believe me. I sighed, rubbing my temples. It's not about what I believe. It's about what the investigators are going to find. You need to prepare for what's coming. She collapsed into sobs again, her body shaking as she clutched the table. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but I couldn't let it pull me back in. She had made her choices. Now, she had to deal with the consequences. I turned toward the door, ready to leave again, to get out of this house and away from the chaos. But just as my hand touched the doorknob, Lena spoke again, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. Caleb, wait. I froze, my hand hovering over the knob, bracing myself for whatever she was about to say. There's something else, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. What is it, Lena? What else could there possibly be? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, her eyes filled with fear. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Pregnant? How? We hadn't been intimate in months. Months. She must have seen the disbelief on my face, because she quickly followed it up with a confession that shattered whatever was left of my world. I don't know if it's yours or Jake's. I stood there, frozen, my mind blank, unable to process the enormity of what she'd just said. Pregnant. And it might not even be mine. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. I turned back toward the door and walked out without looking back. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe to the channel, put a like under the video, and write a comment about how you like this story.